What's up, Space Pirates? This is your Admiral, the Dread Pirate Dr. Disaster, and last year's The First Descendant cracked the code. They figured it out, guys. They made a series of good-looking female characters, and they got a lot of attention, topping out on Steam at their peak with over 250,000 players. They made some money by giving gamers what they like, while so many other studios refuse to do it.
Ah, yes, The First Descendant, the supposed Rosetta Stone of modern game design. Because someone somewhere remembered that polygonal cleavage still moves units. We're told here with performative awe that developers cracked the code by assembling a harem of high-resolution mannequins and dangling them before the marketplace like a gilded carrot before a starving mule. And what is this code exactly? What was deciphered here? That some segment of the gaming population, trained by decades of digital cheesecake and arrested adolescence, will indeed click on whatever jiggles most efficiently? That corporate libido can still be monetized under the tattered flags of giving gamers what they like? What a revelation. And here I was thinking that Steam charts just measured player engagement and not Pavlovian drool velocity. Meanwhile, the invocation of studios refusing to do it is telling. It implies not a legitimate creative difference or a competing artistic ethos, but a kind of moral failure. A refusal to serve the baser instincts of the crowd as virtue, as if restraint were heresy, as if the absence of fetish armor in a game is a personal betrayal.
Unfortunately for The First Descendant though, and I'm not trying to rag on them too hard, but this is just the truth, the developer Nexon spent a ton of time making sure that the characters in their game looked good, which is awesome, but they didn't put as much time into making the game itself all that fun. Here we are, just about a year after the game's release, and they aren't even hitting 10,000 concurrent players each day on Steam, despite the fact that they have put out content regularly for the game. The problem is that the game is a bit like a mediocre Christmas present with really good wrapping paper. Unfortunately, once you've unwrapped The First Descendant, you realize there isn't much there.
We're told that The First Descendant is like a mediocre Christmas present with real good wrapping paper. And perhaps the analogy stands, but how strange then that the autopsy is being performed by someone who never appears to have actually opened that box, having only admired the wrapping paper, shaken the box a bit, and concluded from the resulting sound that no joy could possibly lie within it. It is a curious thing to mourn the gameplay loop of a title one hasn't looped through oneself. Dr. Disaster assures us that Nexon simply didn't spend enough time on making the game fun. But how does he know this? Because of Steam charts? Because of post-launch attrition? If the only proof we require to diagnose a game's soul is a dip in daily concurrent users, then we might as well declare every cult classic dead on arrival, and entomb any game without a monetized treadmill. There's a deeper implication here that any game not maintaining a 5-digit player base a year out is automatically a failure, regardless of genre, scope, or intended lifespan. What Dr. Disaster is doing here is not critique. It is pseudo-stock analysis dressed in the borrowed clothes of creative judgment. Also note the casual assumption that a project failing to master every conceivable design discipline, mechanics, aesthetics, content pacing, live service cadence, server tech, must be dismissed as a missed opportunity. It's a strangely brittle standard, especially when so many of gaming's enduring legends were launched with their own frayed edges, missing pieces, and systems held together by the duct tape of post-release patches. Their flaws didn't stop them. Sometimes they defined them. To pretend that greatness requires perfection is not just ahistorical. It is a convenient fiction used to punish anything that dares to be as good as it can be, regardless of circumstance. And we shouldn't pretend either that opinions built at a distance, pieced together from secondhand footage and the rise and fall tides of Steam charts, can meaningfully grasp what a game is.
As a matter of fact, it is possible to be good at everything. Look at Stellar Blade as an example. It is possible to make a game with characters that gamers appreciate looking at, while still making a game that gamers want to play. But, from the sound of things, Nexon may have failed to understand this truth once again. The game Vindictus Defying Fate just opened their alpha test phase up for players, and on the surface level, the game looks great. I mean, just look at the character creator here, and the reaction from gamers on social media has been predictable. But Vindictus is not getting very much love from the people who have played the alpha on Steam. They hit about 41,000 players at its peak so far, which is pretty solid, but look at the review score for the game. Only 46% of players are giving it a positive score. A good portion of people are complaining that it doesn't run well, which we have to remember that this is an alpha. That sort of thing can and almost certainly will be fixed. I'm not bothered by that. The really bothersome part is that there are a ton of reviews from people who are upset that the gameplay just isn't very good. As much as gamers do love it when game studios align themselves with us, letting us have a character creator mode like this, at the end of the day, we are gamers, and if the gameplay isn't good, we're gonna leave.
Dr. Disaster continues saying that a game can be both visually appealing and mechanically satisfying, with Stellar Blade trotted out as Exhibit A. A fair enough point in theory, though one suspects this observation, like so many of its kind, is less about insight than about brandishing the one recent example the speaker remembers, watching someone else play on Twitch. From there, the critique turns to Vindictus Defying Fate, or rather to its alpha test, which is judged not on what it is, but on what it isn't yet. Yes, the characters look good, yes, the player response on social media is predictable, and yes, we are also told with great concern that the Steam reviews are mixed, and that the gameplay is disappointing, but also that apparently this means players are fleeing in rational disgust. But notice the framing from Dr. Disaster. His is a tone of someone who is not sharing first-hand frustration, but merely curating the grievances of others and presenting them as self-evident truth. The alpha label is acknowledged only to be dismissed. Technical issues, we are reassured, can and almost certainly will be fixed. A polite disclaimer before diving into the real charge, that the gameplay just isn't very good. But upon what basis, Dr. Disaster? 10 minutes of footage? Secondhand reviews? The offhand reactions of a Steam community? Notoriously allergic to anything that requires patience or depth. Is it difficult to escape the feeling that this judgment is not based on any serious engagement, but instead on ambient chatter and algorithmic consensus? And for someone so enticed to repeatedly call his audience gamers, the question is, if he hasn't played the game, hasn't wrestled with its systems, or felt the rhythm of its combat, or seen where it stumbles firsthand, then he isn't offering a critique. He is reading aloud someone else's critique and calling it gospel. Alright, the branding, the turn from analysis, however shallow, into theater. The serious voice swapped for a new one. The next 2 minutes of Dr. Disaster's video here play out like a meth-fueled audition for a Disneyland ride operator with a YouTube login. Now we are no longer evaluating games, we are recruiting for the HMS algorithm, shouting over the wind of our own ego. Subscribers are no longer viewers. They are space pirate a-holes conscripted into a fleet where every 1,000 souls gets a new ship, apparently selected by democratic fiat or super chat bribes. And what began as a review has now become lore building for a cult personality, complete with in-jokes, animated overlays, and thinly veiled begging repackaged as community engagement. One is almost impressed by the efficiency with which parasocial manipulation has been dressed in the aesthetic of fandom. To Dr. Disaster's credit, this all works, the numbers speak. A sea of metrics does flow in. Not because insight was delivered, of course, but because he has mastered the sacred art of dangling shiny things in front of a crowd. Meme voice shoutouts, nostalgic references to late 90s shooters, and a tossed-off Spaceball quote seal the bond. This is content for people who want to feel like they're part of something, even if that something is just a Discord server with a Jolly Roger. And my question is this really what passes for quality in this domain? Are we still applauding the clarity of thought, the strength of argument, or the merit of critique? Or are we just celebrating that someone out there yelled loud enough, often enough, and gamified his call to action with enough retro spice to earn algorithmic favor?
Anyhow, let's take a look at this Vindictus situation. The player count for the alpha on Steam is promising, though the beta for the First Descendant topped out at 77,000 players back when that came out, so the numbers are a bit down for Vindictus as you can see here, which may suggest that we are already seeing the diminishing returns that you would expect to see with a developer that uses attractive characters in order to lure people in. On the other hand, this is just the alpha test for Vindictus, and the number may go up when the beta test comes out, as long as they've fixed some of their performance issues. It's hard to say for sure, but one thing that I suspect they won't be able to fix is the fact that a lot of people are saying the game just isn't any fun. Last year, I played a little bit of the First Descendant, maybe 3 or 4 hours, and it didn't take me long to realize the game isn't for me. I was glad to see that some people were enjoying it, and so I praised it for bucking the trend that we saw in gaming for a long time, where they gave us ugly trolls for female characters. But I didn't care for the gameplay at all, so I ducked out early, and it makes me sad to say that Vindictus sounds an awful lot like the First Descendant in the sense that it may be all flash and little substance.
We return now to the Temple of Numbers, Steam concurrent peaks, beta versus alpha comparisons, and the ominous specter of diminishing returns. This is all an alluring framework. You just plug the numbers into the model, graph the descent, and conclude that the party's already over before the cake is even out of the oven. But behind all this statistical mumbling is a sleight of hand that never quite owns up to itself. Has Dr. Disaster even played the game he is talking about? Now instead, this video is all about him squinting at the charts, like he's a Wall Street analyst peering at a tech startup, convinced that what he is witnessing is not a rough draft, but a failed final exam. A game that dares to debut attractive characters is immediately suspected of luring people in, because clearly no one would show up if the gameplay stood on its own. The presumption is delivered with such confident cynicism that you almost forget it's entirely untested by actual play. And what does it mean to say that the numbers are down from the First Descendant's beta? Down compared to what exactly? Different genres, different times of release, different marketing cycles, different player fatigue levels? The comparison is as thin as the conclusions drawn from it. The argument hinges entirely on a reading of digital tea leaves rather than engagement with the game itself. This is all forecast and no field work. The only thing firmer than the numbers is the unshakable vibe that the game isn't any fun. A lot of people are saying, yeah, the eternal shield of the pundit who wants to sound plugged in without risking being wrong. But who are these people? How many of them played for more than an hour? How many understood the systems in place? How many simply bounced off the alpha because it wasn't designed to be entertaining yet only functional? No distinction is made. All reviews, it seems, are equal so long as they support the conclusion already drawn. In the end, Dr. Disaster's critique of Vindictus Defying Fate amounts to this. The early numbers aren't high enough, the vibes aren't strong enough, and the character models are probably too good for the game to be good. This is not analysis, this is complaining disguised as the smug detachment of someone who wouldn't be caught dead queuing into an alpha unless it was for content. Something also worth mentioning at this point is that Dr. Disaster invokes gamers with the reverence of a televangelist addressing his flock. This is something a lot of grifters do, in fact. Gamers this and gamers that, and gamers will do X, Y, and Z if the game isn't good or bad. The word repeated like a mantra as if simply uttering it makes one part of the elect. But what is really being said here? That liking good character models and responsive controls makes you part of some illuminated brotherhood? That calling your audience gamers on loop grants your opinions special access to the truth? This is posturing, nothing more, a cheap performance of belonging, because nowhere in this monologue is there evidence that Dr. Disaster actually is a gamer in the sense that matters. Someone who plays the video games, explores them, tests them, struggles with them, reflects on what he just played. Someone who understands that gameplay is not a static object to be rated like a frozen pizza, but a dynamic experience shaped by context, by pacing, and by an actual player mindset. Instead, gamers use the way a politician might use fellow patriots when talking to a crowd of people, as a flattering mirror held up to the audience designed to secure their nods and likes without offering anything substantive in return. It's pandering, and it works precisely because it flatters rather than challenges. You just tell the crowd what they already believe, cloaking hasty generalizations in the language of common sense. Calling your audience gamers a dozen times does not inherently make you credible, and the repetition makes this feel less like a community and more like a camouflage, a way to avoid being questioned by pretending that you belong.
The gameplay is getting roasted by people. Let's look at a couple reviews here. The review from this person here has one of the highest counts of people who found the review helpful. He wrote, "I had high expectations for this, but it feels like a very old game." And
Dr. Disaster spends nearly 2 minutes dissecting a single Steam review while insisting he also has surveyed a couple of others. This selective focus on the most helpful opinion is not just a lazy shortcut here. It is a reoccurring pattern, mirroring the same superficial deference to Steam charts and democratic tallies. Popularity is mistaken for authority, and the crowd's noisy consensus becomes the arbiter of quality. Yet amid all this, the question of first-hand experience remains stubbornly unanswered. 3 or 4 hours with the first Descendant hardly qualifies as a full engagement, especially for a game that unfolds over dozens if not hundreds of hours. And yet that modest playtime is the entire foundation of his verdict. A verdict quickly reinforced by selectively citing a lengthy, scathing review whose author complains that the game feels like a very old game, with slow combat, underwhelming special skills, and missing features. The critique repeats familiar refrains about clunky interaction, a lack of environmental engagement, and an apparent dilution of the original Vindictus experience. But this granular list of complaints, lifted wholesale from a frustrated player's review, doesn't constitute analysis so much as parroting. It begs the question, did Dr. Disaster invest time in exploring the game's systems, or is he simply echoing the loudest voices in the crowd? Moreover, Dr. Disaster seems unaware or unwilling to acknowledge that games often launch in states that don't fully represent their final form. The mention that features will probably be added later is shrugged off as a failure rather than recognized as a standard part of iterative game development. What's missing here is the patience, the context, or the curiosity that might illuminate why these design choices exist and how they might evolve. And so Dr. Disaster's analysis here collapses into a convenient dismissal, powered more by numbers and external opinions than by a nuanced understanding that might come through dedicated play and critical engagement. So once again, this is not a critique, this is just a recycling of popular grievances, delivered without any depth or insight than one would expect from someone purporting to know the game. On that note, it is important to clarify my own perspective about this. This is not my personal defense of the game itself, but a critique of the ecosystem of criticism it inhabits. We live in an age where everyone is a critic now, and yet that ubiquity has not elevated the quality or depth of discourse. Instead, it has flattened it. The assumption that every critique carries equal weight or substance is a mistake. Popularity measured by likes, thumbs up, or helpful votes is no proxy for insight or rigor. A highly upvoted negative review often signals not a deep analytical appraisal, but a chorus of agreement rooted in shared frustration or simple resentment. And the loudest voices may drown out the more nuanced or thoughtful perspectives that lack a crowd's immediate resonance. Criticism here ceases to be a space for reflection or understanding, and instead becomes a venting ground where products are subjected to righteous fury without the requirement of thoughtfulness. This is a critical distinction because it reveals the gulf between the spectacle of mass opinion and the art of meaningful critique. Not every popular opinion deserves to be treated as definitive judgment, especially when the critic's own engagement with the subject remains cursory at best.
Once again, this sounds like a game that isn't much of a game. They want to cash in on gamers craving good-looking characters. But here is another review which criticizes them for jumping on
The game is
old
dismissed as not much of a game, a mere cash grab aimed at gamers' appetite for attractive characters. Yet the substance of that dismissal is, once again, drawn not from extended play or careful analysis, but from the algorithmically amplified voice of another user review, this time complaining about the game's alleged failure to grasp what made the original Vindictus worthwhile. This review, like so many others, echoes a sense of nostalgia for a pre-Rise era, lamenting the shift toward a Souls-like format that supposedly distorts the core gameplay. Granted, this complaint is a familiar one. You have bosses with relentless attacks that force a repetitive bait-and-punish cycle that quickly becomes tedious and dull. And that is a valid frustration for some players, no doubt. But it's also a perspective filtered through the prism of personal expectation and a longing for a bygone design ethos. Yet crucially, these complaints are still being lifted wholesale from a single-player Steam review, one among many, rather than from Dr. Disaster's own detailed experience. What this reveals is the thinness of Dr. Disaster's own engagement. He leans hard on the crowd's voices, on those reviews boosted by the platform's invisible hand, rather than committing to the demanding work of his own sustained critical play. This reliance on democratic popularity, on the so-called wisdom of the crowd, is less about genuine critique and more about playing the algorithmic game to secure clicks and views. And yet, when it comes to Stellar Blade, the reviewer shifts gears, pointing to it as a whole package that marries character appeal with solid gameplay and narrative.
The thing is, if a developer wants to take advantage of the huge market for good-looking female characters, that's awesome. Gamers are mostly guys, and so this is a smart marketing strategy, but they can't forget to make a game to go along with these characters. Look at Stellar Blade, if you want an example of someone that did this right. Obviously, Eve is gorgeous in Stellar Blade, but the game itself was solid as hell. The music was great. The gameplay was great. The story was entertaining. It was the whole package, and the idea that we would be sustained simply by TNA is going too far in the other direction, and it's insulting. In the same way that I don't want a game that preaches woke messaging at me because it isn't fun, I don't want a game that only cares about surface-level, good-looking female character designs.
This comparison, however, is presented without the same depth of interrogation. How much has Dr. Disaster truly engaged with Stellar Blade? Or is it simply convenient to hold it up as a foil, a shorthand for success in this genre? And then finally, Dr. Disaster finishes this video with that all-too-familiar YouTube call to action.
But I'm gonna leave it there. Have any of you tried Vindictus yet? If so, what were your impressions? And if not, then why not? Drop your thoughts into the comment section below.
Dr. Disaster, your channel is less a platform for informed analysis and more a marketplace for impressions, opinions, and subscriber-driven spectacle. And the performative space pirate persona just caps off your forced algorithmic engagement, where substance often plays second fiddle to the demands of audience capture. What really grinds my gears is that this is the sorry state to which video games reviews have descended. This isn't hard-earned, sweat-drenched analysis forged through hours of engagement, wrestling with nuance, and wrestling with the medium itself. No, instead, this is just a shallow hustle. A cycle of clicks, a glance at Steam charts, an echo chamber chorus of crowd analytics, and a dash of whatever gimmicky channel branding will rake in the views. Lather, rinse, and repeat. There's zero risk in siding with the grain, either for or against the latest shiny release. No accountability, no real stakes, just a treadmill of algorithm-friendly opinions, where a boosted user review counts as gospel and personal experience is often an afterthought, or it is entirely absent. And here's the kicker. How many people have actually called out Dr. Disaster for the glaring fact that he spent maybe a handful of hours total with these games? How many people have pointed out that he's riffing off the loudest voices in the comments sections rather than his own deep, direct knowledge? Not many, because in this climate, quantity, the sheer volume of thumbs up and views, somehow trumps quality. And thus we see how the marketplace of ideas has been thoroughly hijacked by the marketplace of clicks.